All right, back to South Carolina as voters there prepare for the Democratic primary on Saturday. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is joining us now from Charleston to talk more about the race. All right, Ed, let us dig into it. Many experts and pundits and the former Vice President Biden have talked about the importance of the black vote moving into South Carolina. So I'm wondering, you know, what do the polls say about who they're supporting? Because early in this process, Joe Biden really felt like this would be a place where he would get a big boost. But based on, you know, the outcome of Nevada's caucuses, I don't know if this is a shoo-in for him now.
Well, look, he at one point led by almost 40 points in this state. Inevitably, that was going to come back closer to earth, and it has. He's still in the lead, but he's been caught a bit by two people, both Bernie Sanders, who, of course, is considered now the party frontrunner, and Tom Steyer, the businessman who's been unloading millions of dollars in ads in this state and has seen his numbers climb as a result. Among black voters, who in 2016 made up about 60% of the Democratic primary electorate, Vice President Biden still holds a good lead, but it's been cut into by both Steyer and Sanders. And so over the course of this week, we can expect especially Steyer to serve as a stalking horse on the vice president as they try to win enough support over the next several days. But Biden, who has deep connections in this state, going back deep into his Senate career, he had long-standing relationships with the former Senator Fritz Hollings, with former Senator Strom Thurmond, was at one time a good buddy of Lindsey Graham. Now, of course, that is perhaps up for debate. And Jim Clyburn, of course, the House Majority Whip, who is a power broker in this state. Biden expected to spend the whole week exploiting those connections as much as he can to get his first victory in this 2020 campaign.
Okay, speaking of Jim Clyburn, House Majority Whip and South Carolina representative, spoke to Gayle King about turning out the black vote. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Why is black turnout so important?
I think it's because the black community has, I think, the obligation to let people know what is in their hearts and their heads. You don't do that by following the results of Iowa, New Hampshire, or Nevada. You do that by voting for the candidate that best address what's in your heart and what's in your head.
So you mentioned how close he was with the former vice president. Clyburn's expected to announce his endorsement a little bit later on. How much weight does that endorsement hold?
We're expecting a Clyburn endorsement Wednesday morning, so he's going to sit through that debate here behind us in Charleston, see what happens, and then announce his decision on Wednesday morning. We believe it still holds great weight in this state. He is, of course, the senior member of the congressional delegation. He is the number 3 in House Democratic leadership, the most senior black lawmaker on Capitol Hill, and in this state still revered as a power broker and someone who has helped secure this state's first in the South status, at least on the primary calendar. His advice, frankly, should apply to everyone, not just black voters, which is, you know, vote with your heart, what makes most sense to you, not necessarily what the polls or the results in earlier states have reflected. But certainly it is a sought-after endorsement and one that many observers believe will ultimately go to Vice President Biden. The question is, why hasn't he done it already? And it's partly because, out of deference to this debate that we're hosting tomorrow night, he wants voters in the state to be able to see it, make up their own decisions, and then he'll announce his.
So Bernie Sanders, he's had a really strong start, becoming, well, many people said this, that he's become the first presidential candidate in history to win the popular vote in all 3 early states in a competitive primary. I guess, does that not include Iowa, because it was a caucus, and I think he was probably neck and neck with Buttigieg, right? I'm presuming that Iowa has all their numbers in by now. I'm wondering how opponents are responding to this.
Well, it's kind of a silly statistic anyway, because the only measure that ultimately matters is the delegate count, and he's leading there by all means. You're right, it was Iowa where he didn't win, although we'll see, because at this point, depending on how you do the math in Iowa, he won. Depending on how you do the math, Buttigieg won. Look, ultimately, the number that matters is the delegate math. And right now, Sanders has the lead after those first three contests. It is beginning to cause some consternation among elements of the Democratic Party that a self-described democratic socialist is now in the lead. Notably, for example, Donna Shalala, congresswoman from the Miami area who represents a lot of Cuban and Venezuelan Americans, concerned and tweeted her concerns last night after Sanders talked about Fidel Castro in his 60 Minutes interview, saying, of course, he was a brutal dictator, but what's so wrong about some of the things that he did in terms of social programs, literacy programs, healthcare programs when he was the Cuban leader. That's a non-starter with many South Florida voters, and it could cause ripple effects across or down the rest of a Democratic ballot if there is someone at the top of the ticket in the state of Florida who professes any level of admiration for someone like Fidel Castro. So that's an example, a very specific and regional one, to the kinds of concerns that we expect Democratic lawmakers to begin expressing if they're not a fan of Sanders, and we'll probably won't get a good taste of that until next week or even later this week, as members of Congress are asked to weigh in on how this race is beginning to shape up.
All right, so before they head to Saturday, they got to make it through Tuesday night. They got to survive that. The CBS News and the Congressional Black Caucus Institute co-hosting the next Democratic presidential debate right where you are tomorrow night. 7 candidates have qualified so far, including Tom Steyer. So he was not on the debate stage last week. And, you know, the last time he was on the debate stage, I guess it's debatable whether or not his presence really had any significant impact. But in South Carolina, he seems to be polling quite well. So could things be a little different for him here?
Yeah, I mean, if someone like Elizabeth Warren or Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg wants to do well, they got to get past Tom Steyer. So either they got to attack him or they have to ignore him. And if they're doing that, they're essentially writing off South Carolina and focused instead on what's happening on Super Tuesday. This is the final debate before South Carolina votes on Saturday. It's the final debate before 14 states, including California, Texas, Virginia, Colorado, vote next Tuesday. So this actually has a broader effect beyond the Palmetto State, because if you're a voter in those other states trying to make up a decision with about a week to go, this is your opportunity to watch them. I suspect you'll see people like Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren thinking more about that audience than the audience just in this state.
All right. Ed, thank you so much.
Take care.
So as we told you, CBS News and the Congressional Black Caucus Institute will co-host the next Democratic presidential debate right there in Charleston, South Carolina. We're interested in hearing questions that you might have for the candidates, though. And what's really cool is you can submit them via Twitter. All you got to do is write the question and then tag on that hashtag there, DemDebate. You can stream the debate right here, Tuesday night, 7 Central. And we're going to have coverage throughout the day from South Carolina and a special edition of Red and Blue, which is going to stream at 5 p.m. Eastern.